Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or whatever time of day that you are listening to this beyond the original live session. Today, we are looking at proactive CX, the growth lever that challenger brands just simply cannot afford to ignore. And joining me today, I have the ever knowledgeable and insightful Orinta and Marie with us today that are going to cover some of the main parts around proactive CX, including insights and analytics research, which is Marie's speciality, and that operationalizing CX, which comes under Orinta's brand. So before we start, ladies, do you want to give a bit of background on yourself? And I'll start with you, Orinta, because you are on the top for me.
I thought that might happen. Hi, everyone who's listening in now and later. So my name's Orinta, and I've spent the last sort of almost couple of decades in customer experience, and also had the pleasure of being through the roller coaster of a successful startup in the UK. Before that, I joined a startup that failed, as many of them do. And so for 9 years, I was part of Tails.com, which is a tailored dog food brand, and it was a challenger brand in that industry. So I joined around the time of launch and then was part of the team building it up to exit and sale. And a bit beyond. So I really know a thing of two how to build strong CX foundations and how to scale them and make sure that they deliver impressive commercial results. And now I work with startups and scale-ups and SMEs on a fractional or advisory basis to help them do the same. And then on a personal note, I'm a mom of two. I'm a dog owner, 2 dogs, 2 kids. And I just really hate intentionally bad service, which is why I do what I do. That's about it.
Absolutely. And I always find so many times, especially in this recruiting space, usually people come to me at the time when everything's already on fire. And sometimes it's quite nice to come before that to anticipate anything that might go a little bit on fire, which is you, Marie, really, in terms of the kickoff and the start. So give us a bit of an overview of your background.
Preventing fires is a lovely segue. Thank you so much for hosting us today, Kerry. So I'm Marie. I've got a background in all things insight and customer growth, predominantly in the tech space, having worked for companies like eBay and then taking not on the high street through turnaround ready for IPO. And in very, very commercially led insight roles where insight clearly leads to an action in product or marketing or helping a launch or an expansion. And so most recently, for those that know me, know that I was part of the team at JP Morgan launching the Chase Bank to the UK, and it's no surprise given the investment in really good research to make sure we got that right, and brilliant CX and ongoing servicing, that it's been a huge success. Outside of that, you can find me as a trustee of a local animal rescue charity, and I also teach scuba diving. But if anyone would like my help on a project, big or small, or just to rack my brains over a coffee, it's just Marie Lewis Insight here on LinkedIn.
I didn't know you were a scuba diving instructor, Marie. That's something new for me. I've been scuba diving twice. And I want to go back.
Anytime, Kerry, like you or your family to get in the water, I'm there. Borneo to Brazil. Let's go.
Do you know what? My other half always claims that he wants to do it, but he said his ears are too bad, yet he can go on a plane. I'm like, make up your mind. Which one is it?
I can help him. He is right, though. It's important. It's important that that's safe.
Absolutely. And so, Marie, you talked about there, you did a lot of the research behind the launch of the Chase banking app, which was a nice segue into what's the importance of the research and consumer insight before launching a product or brand to market.
Yeah, so I think it falls into several buckets, but let's say you're an entrepreneur with a brilliant idea. And actually you might have worked hard to get investment, or you're about to launch a big expensive, let's face it, marketing campaign, or you've teamed up with influencers and you're getting your socials sorted out. So the first part is knowing the audience and knowing the need you're going out to meet. So at JP Morgan Chase, we knew we couldn't just launch another very slick fintech banking app. There were lots of those. We had to offer something else. And so we had to understand what was missing in people's lives. So we went out and we spent time with them looking at their money management techniques, their workarounds, their hacks, to try and delve into what they thought about what was on offer today, and how we could help them, basically. So under kind of pinning everything was what's in it for them, how can we help them? And that's how the idea around cashback was formed. And we effectively had a triumvirate of things at Chase. We had to have, of course, a brilliantly performing app, so the CX running all the way through consistently from that marketing into the day-to-day app. The value piece, what's it giving me? Well, actually, it's rewarding me for something I've got to do anyway, spend. And then underpinning all of that, exceptionally good service, customer service, especially when you're going to call in with something as important as finances, or an equivalent industry would be health and insurance. You want to be able to contact someone and for them to be able to help you. So that research was critical in ensuring that we understood what people needed and that they'd react well to the proposition, and that we had that very expensive advertising, because it's on TV and through lots of other channels, that we were making that really efficient and meeting the right people at the right time.
Absolutely. And I guess dependent on the sort of size of the research project, etc., what would you expect it to sort of cost out looking at something like a research or insights project? Or is it that a question of how long's a piece of string?
No, and you can, many ways to skin a cat. So, and particularly for smaller businesses and scale ups, you might need a relatively small piece of work to reaffirm that you're heading in the right direction. And especially with some of the Gen AI tools today that can help you moderate multiple interviews at the same time, still with genuine people, picking up genuine views. But you can do that quite cost effectively at scale, as long as you're asking the right thing and, all the usual research best practice, which is, why you do need a professional to help you. But you can do that quite quickly and at lower cost. And I think, again, depending on the scale of the launch or the expansion, but everywhere that I've been, Insight is that kind of unknown team that's 10 times worth its weight in gold. And I'm sure we'll come around to talk about kind of the other end of things, but, spotting things early on, helping, you talked about avoiding the fires, spotting when your audience has changed, or spotting that you're losing people in your conversion funnel, or people aren't coming back as frequently. So it helps you see things quickly, fix it. So you're often cost saving as well as helping generate the revenue.
Well, absolutely, because things like marketing are a really expensive exercise, right? Especially if you're marketing to the wrong people or marketing something that people aren't interested in.
But also even just making investments in changing something on site or in the app, that can be a huge technical investment. So checking that that's the right thing to do for today's customer beforehand. And again, that might not have to be a huge piece of work. It's can be a bit of a sense check and helping you refine that idea.
Absolutely. And Orinta, I think you unmuted a couple of times there, so.
No, I think I can add to that. The early, I guess you're talking about pre-launch as well, when you have a good idea. And I've been speaking to a few founders recently as part of the bigger sort of research into customer experience challenges from my perspective. And it's such a similar story. Acquisition is expensive and people just don't stay. And there are, of course, multiple reasons as to why. You might have something's wrong with the product. I find that's the worst, because that's sometimes difficult to to fix, because maybe they didn't do that customer research before. And it's like, oh, it's so, my product's so good. You live in that bubble that you think it's just going to serve everyone, but that's not necessarily true. So you need to check the hypotheses that you have. And like you said, Marie, I think it's in terms of those, as you do get going, picking the right metrics, from your sort of churn and retention, and the metrics that represent the most important bits of your journey that really build trust with the customer or break it and generate revenue as well, right? So, if you see your retention dropping, why is that? What's shifting? And I think from your sort of world, it's like, over time, has your audience changed? Or, has as you scaled, have the bits of the journey broken down and you didn't really notice, or you didn't invest time and effort and resource into it? They're just, and you can overlay it with a variety of customer insights. And sometimes I find that the cheapest way is to use the data that you already have, right? You get, a lot of customers leave reviews, and you might have some sort of survey that you send out, but also they call you, they email, they chat. Like, it's just such a gold mine of existing insight that can, and now there's all sorts of ways to sort of analyze the sentiment that your customers have. But I think it's I always think it's that sort of customer world is the shifting. It's like a puzzle that keeps changing, right? You can never assume it's going to stay the same. So investing fundamentally that customer research early on and ongoing, and your customer experience, I'll talk a bit more later. It's just, if you don't invest, it's false economy, right? Because it gets you into bigger trouble down the line. So I think I'm just preaching to the choir here, is probably my point.
But I love your point about measuring what's important to the business. And for lots of retail, that's frequency and loyalty or retention. And early on, it might just be acquisition, and then shifts, and then your campaign, and you're launching more features if it's a digital product. So as long as you've got an eye on those metrics, and everybody in the business, whether they're in product, CX, marketing, as long as what they're working on is let's stick with frequency, all about increasing frequency, then you're all focused on the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, on metrics, I think, because I like to talk operational stuff, right? It is so important as you pick your metrics. I don't believe NPS represents your customer experience in a very big way, by the way. I'm talking about meteor metrics that actually drives business results here. So if you pick metrics that are important to your business, make sure that people are aligned in terms of goals of how they can impact. Imagine you're a team of, 50, 100 people, 200, whatever. You in a specific role need to understand, one, what are the business priorities and what are they based on? And secondly, how you can impact them. So same as with customer experience. If you're struggling with frequency, you need everyone's ears. If it's a customer support team, you need everyone's ears on that. Trying to explain that. You need to understand that you may need to change your marketing messages. Everyone has to work towards the same priorities that represent what you need to improve in those metrics, right? It cannot be these sort of working in silos and working in your own little world that, would impact something. So that joint up view, the right forums to have those conversations, the right metrics, the visibility of those metrics, of really sort of breathing them every day and understanding what they mean, is a massive deal, I think, to really have a successful customer experience and strong business results. So you don't just put a metric and you're like, oh, these 3 people on the dashboard look at it every day. That's not really what drives customer change or business change in general. So I just wanted to make sure that we understand the business metrics are live things, and they need to be understood by everyone in the business.
Yeah. I think it's okay for teams to have sub metrics as long as they understand how it relates.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about NPS before, Orinta, and I actually don't mind any kind of, whatever it is, some sort of measurement of how your customer feels.
Yeah.
For me, the critical bit is being able to differentiate how they feel about you overall, which is nice to know, but potentially can't use it that tactically. But what you can use, and actually in my example was actually not on the high street, and we also had Touchpoint MPS. So everybody loved Not on the High Street. They still do. It's an amazing brand, really, really helpful for those gifting moments throughout the year. But we had relatively low or lower scores, I should say, because nothing was low, on the homepage and at search. So we could see that part of our journey for our audience who actually had shifted, and they had become a slightly more mainstream shopper, and so they needed more help at those points. So we could experiment with curating collections for them. So what was just critical to know, and it didn't matter that it was NPS or any other kind of how do you feel about this score, what was critical was it was that touch point, and then therefore we could be really proactive and try out some ideas there. So yeah, Orinta and I'll do a separate session on CSAT and MPS.
You can have an MPS. I'm not some sort, you can have, but it doesn't tell you much. I don't think.
That's what I'm saying. On its own, it doesn't. You have to understand how that relates to your. Yeah.
Do you know what? I can't remember who said it, and it's somebody who I really, really like. So forgive me, whoever came. But it was MPS has always been, or should have been used as a measure and not a target, whereas some businesses use it as a target, which is where it becomes the issue. Because she said, if a measure becomes a target, it ceases to measure anything of importance. And actually, I get that because I was speaking to somebody who was the CX director of a luxury jewelry business. Well, it had a couple of elements: high street, middle of the road, and then ultimate luxury. And they had they were high at everything because they used to survey at the point that this person had just brought a Rolex watch. Who's going to be unhappy at that point if they've made the purchase? But they never used to look into their repairs journey because they knew it was terrible. And so it took a lot for the team at C-suite to allow them to start looking at the MPS at that particular touch point, because they knew it was going to tank their scores. But actually, it really enhanced the business because they were able to see what they could change.
And you're talking here about Rolex, right? Everyone knows a Rolex. Everyone wants one. It's a name. But we're a lot of the times, I think, you and I, that we work with companies that are just starting out, really sort of earning that seat at the table in their industry. And while Rolex maybe at some point, and maybe they can't, of course, they needed to fix that, but they probably had more freedom to not nail part of the journey, right? But when you are new, and when you're trying to prove yourself and prove your product, it is unacceptable to not listen to customer feedback, to not act on it very quickly, and to not keep them close to you and to your business, whatever way you decide to do that. I think you just do not have that luxury. And I always am very cautious with saying customer loyalty, because I really truly believe it doesn't exist. We have so many things, so many companies right now that you really have so much choice. It's about how useful you are. It's about how convenient you are. It's just like, do you meet that need for a specific thing in someone's life? And then there's something also about this. It's like, I like brands who have humility, and they understand that they occupy a very small part of someone's life, and they need to nail that bit, because if they don't, bye-bye. Like, there's just no customer loyalty in that sense anymore. It's just like who you can be loyal to someone very local, I think, like your local bakery or someone else that you work with. But it's
hairdresser.
Hairdresser, exactly. These, the very small businesses, that's quite a different world. But when we talk about scaling and growth and all that stuff, you just cannot afford these things to sort of get out of control. Rolex, a bit of different thing, but even they understood, right, that they need to fix the repair process. So it just, Anyways.
Absolutely. And touching on that, actually, there are sometimes some nervousness around founders, especially when they're coming on to things like people can leave very quick Google reviews on social media that, if you're very early on and you're getting negative sort of feedback from customers, like how can you use that to sort of build up engagement with your customers instead of fearing the negative that is so easy to put out there in the public realm right now?
Several of the businesses I've worked at using customer lifetime value type modeling, you can actually put a price on in a good way of a rekindled customer, if you like. So it's so they can become more of an advocate because you've reached out. Not on the high street. We used to send flowers if something had, we'd obviously do our best to fix the situation, but particularly, a gift needs to arrive on time. And speaking from my own personal experience, and I know lots of people like to shout about Octopus, who happen to be my utilities supplier.
It's one of my good examples, Marie. I know what you're going to say.
So there is genuinely a problem with my bill. Nobody really knows why. They've got readings, but something happened and has reset it for the last 4 years, clearing out all the credit I had with them. So understandably, when I was sent a little, how satisfied are you? I wrote, not very. What I wasn't expecting, which is the delighter and has reframed completely how positively I now see them, is that they reached out and said, well, we're sorry, can you give us some more detail? How can we now fix this? So I'm definitely now in that win back bucket for them. And arguably it makes me more loyal. And now look, I'm an advocate. So it's even more powerful for word of mouth. So you can absolutely put a value on reaching out, closing the loop, and making things right.
I couldn't agree more, because even the best businesses with the best intentions will make mistake and mess up, right? It's how they respond. And to your point, Carrie, when something is public, there's massive reassurance when someone responds properly. I've spent a lot of cringy moments reading Trustpilot review responses for some businesses, and the patronizing tone, the, oh no, we're right, you're wrong. It's just, I like to say that customers may not always be right, but they are always valuable. So it goes that, again, that old American, I think, mantra, everyone's right. No, they aren't right all the time, right? Because not all customers have good intentions, but they're valuable to you and what you can learn, right? I remember there was this one bad complaint of someone, I spent 40 minutes trying to cancel, and on their account you can see that they spent like 9, but it felt like 40. Why is that? Because you didn't make the cancellation flow very easy. So you can learn something, and I think again is that humility, that learning, that taking responsibility, being accountable for how your business behaves, and in the early stages are more important than ever. So I think don't be scared of them. React, see it as like, don't sort of bury your head in the sand and be like, I don't want to see all these bad reviews where something is not working, so you have to fix it, right? And I think the way you respond says so much more about your brand than all the marketing can. And I think that's the consistency in customer experience, right? If I see something that's a shiny brand, but when I need to deal with them and something goes wrong, it's completely different, you will never win me back, because it's such massive inconsistency. And I think I'm a big fan of Bloom & Wild. And of course, their positioning, I just think they're amazing. And they've been amazing from day one. And they're a fundamental, sort of parts of their journeys, delivering flowers on time and delivering them in good quality. And I know that they use technology to sort of, as long as there's the smallest indication that something's going to be late, they will resend that. From a short-term commercial perspective, that doesn't sound like the right thing to do. Long-term, it's absolutely the right thing to do, because it builds trust. It's like you react before the customer does. And that is a really big indicator that you are customer-led, because you proactively build systems that notices an issue and fixes it for the customer before it sort of, explodes and whatever. And of course, in their world, they deal with very, seasonality and sort of spikes of volume and things like that. So I do really like them in that sense. So for early stage founders, I just say, don't be afraid of the bad reviews. make sure that you also collect the good feedback as well. Create systems that collect the stuff that's good rather than just leaving it out there for customers to, to sort of comment. But don't be afraid of it, because it's gold. It tells you what's not working. It lets you pivot, and it lets you make your product better and your service better. So it's you just need to take it less personally, I think, is the advice.
Absolutely. I think Bloom and Wild have got a lot of big fans, because I get a lot of Bloom and Wild presents. And the first time I got one, I thought, oh my God, I'm rubbish at this stuff. How am I going to get in? I managed to make it look pretty nice in the past. But I think they were also the brand, weren't they? The first ones to do the opt out of Mother's Day.
Yeah, so more responsible marketing. I don't know, it was a name, but sort of responsible marketing for opt-outs for Father's Day, Mother's Day, for people who just do not want to see that for whatever reason.
And now I get those emails from every single brand.
So now they pivoted and they changed it. So they don't.
Yes, because they didn't like it, did they? Because they said it's now turned into a bit of a gimmick, I think they mentioned.
Well, yes, that, but also then it's just a reminder for you, right? Whereas now they have this actually beautiful. I checked it recently. Funny enough, beautifully looking preference center, which basically you can select what occasions you want to hear about. So you can do it once a year, and so you around those times you don't need to do it. And it's such a little. It seems like little thing, but it instantly builds a reputation, right? And they started something that was new. Great example again of that sort of customer led, not because they have to be, but because they choose to be. So big fan. Order from them.
And actually, I always find that as a customer, if I'm going to complain about something, it's because I care enough that the company fixes it. Whereas if I don't, I will just quietly leave. So
it's the worst.
I was going to say, how can a proactive approach to CX uncover those silent customers that have been unhappy and just left your brand, who might be perfectly happy to be brought back into the fold? Or how would you approach that?
Marie, if you want, for me, it's like, I will say that it's always easier to win back a customer while they're leaving, rather than after they've left, because it means that something's already broken. But here I think I'm talking more about digital sort of flows for cancellation of your subscription, or if you not so relevant when you have sort of just repeat purchases that someone makes, but it's checking in, creating proactive communication that can help you check in, that can have anything from, I'm being quite specific here, but direct links to your account or whatever, to encourage people to sort of to engage with them in the right way, not too much, to save those moments and say, we're still here, we see something didn't work, or how can you help? So it's that proactive win back within the period of time that is still fresh in customers' mind. And when I talk about proactive, a lot of the times it's about existing customers who have purchased something from you, but when there might be an issue. So if there's an issue with your product, with your deliveries, I don't know, your capacity to do something, the businesses who are like, hello, raise their hand and be like, we messed up, or there's this issue, and we're letting you know this is what we're doing about it. We're going to keep in touch, or, a message on your website, whatever the sort of the medium that you choose is about being transparent with customers. Is a massive deal for building trust and not losing them. So if you interrupt that sort of role, like, well, something's going wrong. If you interrupt that train of thought for the customer, you're much more likely to keep them, earn more trust, generate more revenue, rather than they've already left and 3 months later you sent them a reactivation email. And that works sometimes, but not in that long run. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And there was a big discussion that we had on another show. It was like a get out of wrap, and people were talking about what happened to outbound calls when people leave now to get feedback, just to say, hey, you okay? Because I still quite like people outbound calling me, and it's a genuine surprise because nobody does it anymore.
I know. Oh, yes, you don't.
Like Gusto.
People
I
are
use them all
scared.
the time, and I think, I sometimes think, are Gusto gonna call me at some point, because this is about the time that I reactivate my subscription? And they don't. And the funny thing is, if they did, I probably would, because I'd think, yeah, right.
And again, I think, Marie, maybe that's your world, right? Different customer expectations here. And it is hard for business, right, to know what is expected. Some people will just never pick up the phone, and some will want that conversation. Have you had something like that you've, I guess, had to dig in deeper and find out what's the right solution?
Before we go there, I think relevant to Kerry's point is actually the point you brought up earlier into about the metrics. So using the data that the business already has as an early warning sign, because to your point, once they've gone, they've gone. If you can catch them before they lapse, and actually, you know, in most digital businesses, you don't need many customers to start to see the patterns and start to see, you know, and particularly with subscriptions, you know, the frequency with which they are buying. If you notice at any point in that funnel, something start to change, or a certain cohort or group, you can either quickly reach out and speak to them in terms of that proactive piece if you're unsure what's going on. And I've worked in many businesses that have done that, and we've gone out and spoken. Again, doesn't have to be big scale, but to that group to understand what's happening. Or to this point about being really proactive, you can reach out to them with an offer, a nudge, you know, a reminder that you're there. So it doesn't have to be, you know, it can be quite soft, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong, but it's a really crowded market space. It could be that someone else is doing something really, really well. So again, it could just be a reminder that you're there and look at all the fantastic things that we offer, or to speak to them and understand why competitor X is pulling that group from your audience. You know, can help you pivot earlier on, and so you're kind of in that space of cost saving, or, you know, stopping the fire before it spreads.
I like some of those, like a pet food business that I worked with. I know that some of the time when they were doing outbound, they found, oh, my dog just didn't like that particular food. So they invited them in for future taste tests of new products, which won them back customers, which was a really interesting way of doing it, I think, because I always find on subscription, like for me, for dog food, it is something I need all the time, and it's inconvenient to run out, right? The dogs are not happy.
Well, you know, I know all about dog food. The palatability issues in general, so, you know, with pets, it's like your customer is the customer, but also it's the dog. Because if they don't eat the food, so offering proactive reblends at Tails.com was another way of sort of keeping the customer in, and it worked in a lot of cases where, oh, just try something different, and we're either give it for free or there's a discount. And another thing about that proactive thing, which sort of in line with what you said, Marie, but we've noticed a change in behavior for specific customers that were ordering not only that dry blend, but also wet food and treats and things. It is because I think at any sort of tailored service, right, particularly for pets or motives such as maybe children, it's like you need to decide whether you as a business are the ones that know better or the customer knows better. And I think with this case, it was more a bit of both, because we would recommend I guess not strict, but sort of prescriptive feeding plan. And the way customers used it was different, right? Because they're like, well, I like to treat my dog sometimes, so I'll give them more wet food or treats, and then they're not hungry and they won't, so I will still have too much food, and the frequency suffers. And, you know, they move in, and potentially if they find it too inconvenient, where they then suddenly have 2 bags of food that arrived and they, you know, they're not used yet. It is really it sort of defeats the purpose of convenience, right? Because they have to constantly sort of either contact you, manage their account. And we introduced a feature which was really not against the proposition, but it just wasn't in line with that sort of we know better, is that you could order extra wet food, or, you know, you run out, you can sort of manage, you have more flexibility in managing your account. And lo and behold, revenue grew, and, you know, we improves that retention of those people because we address the actual need. And I think a lot of the times founders and the teams in early stage and scaling business, they get stuck into this bubble where they fall in love with the solution, but not the problem that they're trying to solve. and you're always trying to solve for the customer, right? And the needs might shift a little bit, Marie, that's what we always talk about. It shifted, something's changed, let's address it, let's keep catering for the customer within our sort of remit and our proposition, rather than just sort of closing our eyes and being like, oh, but it's not what we do. So it's a good example, the one I talked about, where you pivoted because of early signs, addressed the need of the customer, and retained them long term, and gave them the flexibility that they needed and the ease, in that sort of feeding your dog daily routine thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ekes back into everything, because every single thing that we've done in and around even AI vendor selection and stuff on these masterclasses, it has been, don't forget your purpose and the purpose behind the reason why you're doing something. And therefore the insight, is this going to be handy for you, your business, your customers? And just to remind us that people are listening in, and by the way, do feel free to drop in any questions. We got just a compliment for you, Marie, on your always full of great insight into insight. Cheers, Ben.
Insight and insight. Yeah, it's a plant. It's actually we can't see on this screen who's dialed in, so I'll have to go and see who's.
That was Benjamin Chilcott.
Oh yeah.
Can you not see it when I? Oh, see, I can see it on the control. Oh, can you see it now? I've just put it on the screen. Can't you see it, Marie?
And now I've got a bubble. There you go.
Yes, there you go.
Insight. Yeah, lovely.
And Simon, MPS is great for a company to promote on its websites and reports and accounts. That's why board likes it. It offers little in telling you how or what to change in CX. Is that?
Yeah. So in a way, it's a vanity metric, basically. It is. It's not
the right implementation. Relationship NPS, maybe, but vanity. But touch point, whether it's
just like more effort score, I guess, in CX.
Really helpful. As long as you know what to do to help you ladder up to that, more business critical.
There's another session in this about how to use it MPS effectively, isn't there? Basically, somewhere.
My biggest problem is with MPS. You could really play around with it, right? You can target different customers. You can exclude them if that's all you want. It doesn't represent real sort of business change. And actually, Simon mentioned the boards, why the boards like it, and that actually I think is a bit of an issue with startups and scalings, because let's take Amazon. I do not think that all of their intentions are very kind. However, they understand that being customer-led, customer-centric, customer-obsessed, whatever you want to call it, is good for business. It's profitable in the long run. And they are not known for really great, human support, but their processes are built around customer comes first and the convenience and everything else. So they've proved time and time again, as there are other companies who did that being customer-led is profitable, but it's a long-term game. So when you're talking about, new businesses that are trying to improve their model, they're trying to, find their place in the industry, that have shareholders, that have employees, it is sometimes hard to make decisions that are right for the customer long term, because you're trying to hit a target, you're trying to achieve something in 6 months, 12, 18 months time. And sometimes you don't necessarily do what's right for that customer journey in the long run. You keep building on this sort of house of cards. I think that happens a lot. And I don't want to move maybe in sort of that fractional thing, but that is again another issue with what founders are communicating, is they don't know what the next right thing to do is. They need to think about something, how to do something 6, 12 months down the line, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge and the insights at the time. So there's always a bit of a gap to fill there. I don't know if you find that, Marie, but it's like, how do you balance that sort of needs of the shareholders, the short-term goals, and actually really leading with those insights and customer understanding in the long run and doing the right thing? Have you had to deal with that in the past?
Yeah, I think for the founders and the scale-up businesses that I've worked with, obviously, the main priority in that stage is, acquisition and revenue, and you're busy doing that. And it goes back to kind of insights can help you refine what you're doing, and it may be a small project here and there. So that's where the fractional piece is so powerful, because you've got people that have got 20 odd years of experience in similar and, you know, other businesses, but still, you know, understanding nuances in customer behaviors and how to service different needs. So you can, you know, pay for tapping into all of that knowledge just to help kind of give that steer at a critical point without needing a fully blown team or you know, big investment at that point.
Well, do you know what? From the recruiting side, you see it in terms of what I always think about as being sustainable recruitment. How long do you keep somebody attracted within your business? How much does it cost to hire somebody, and all of that sort of stuff? And sometimes you could be like, hey, I need someone to do the strategy. They need to do this. They need to do that. So I need a director. And you look at that point and say, from a director's perspective, there is not enough here, because in the day-to-day, you're doing a management piece or the doing role, and that's 95% of your role, with the 5% being the big thing that you need. It's not cheap to hire a CX director. It's not cost effective to hire a CX director if on 95% of the time they're doing a management role. Use that fractional support, because they can help bring your team on as well, the internal people. And that's how you create really sustainable hiring. And that's how you create loyalty within your teams. Because again, loyalty from an employee perspective is a bit of a fallacy. It doesn't exist. It's as long as it's useful to you. And the same as people say, people don't leave a business, they leave a manager. Not true. Sometimes they just have a better opportunity to grow. I know people who go, this is the worst thing ever, because I really love my director or I love my COO and I really don't want to hand in my notice to them. But guess what? Nothing extreme happens. The COO was like, I knew that was happening because we don't have much more here for you to grow. So the same thing that insight is sent on the same sort of side.
It's just to add to you, Gary, it's like you can help fill a gap, give the sort of strategic insight at the right time, and you can upskill the people that they've got. I had a similar conversation with the founder who was deciding whether they want to head up CX or a sort of manager. I'm like, there's not enough for you for this head of to do right now. But you need to hire the right person, upskill them. And I was always in my career grateful that I had a sort of a coach through Tales.com in the early days that was brought in and helped to really sort of grasp certain things, because a lot of the times when early comes, you're the only one that does the thing that you do. And if you don't have any support, you may have support about management, effective ways of working, whatever. But in that sort of area that you own, you might be the only one. And so it's really nice and motivating to get external support, that outside in view as well, someone who's not emotionally attached, who just can come in and help you get clarity from chaos and help upskill the people and give them some, knowledge that they need to really deliver in the future. And I think there's such massive benefit and opportunity there to both, people like myself and Marie, who have all this knowledge and actually want to give some of that knowledge to different businesses, and then the businesses benefiting from that knowledge in the short term. I think it's just sort of a win-win situation, really.
Definitely. And the thing is that people forget a lot of the time when you're thinking about diversity of thought and things like that. Sometimes, if you're a challenger bank, you hire from a bank because you want to do what another challenger bank did, or all of that sort of stuff. And fractional, sometimes you get that diversity of thought from industry, because some industries do things better than others in other ways, or grasp things quicker, because again, retail, for example, were probably one of the earliest industries to start looking at AI as a cost saving initiative whilst delivering great service, because margins are tough, right? And deliveries are expensive and all of that sort of stuff. And now everybody expects things next day, right? If we're told that we have to wait about 5 days for something to be delivered, we're a bit like, what? And so I guess from your side, what do you think, and open to either of you answering first, what is the most, because people know generally what finance do, and they think, oh, we know we need to hire a marketer, we know we need to hire somebody in sales, and taking that more proactive look. What's the most common misconception about CX, do you think, as a discipline? And why do people tend to look at it?
I feel really jumping in here because I feel very passionate about this.
Oh yeah, you'll have to fight me, Orinta. Do you know what? I'm going to be brief. Yeah. My biggest, and I'm going to go right out there. I'm going to go right on the soapbox about this. People have a tendency to think CX is the contact center. CX is any touch point with the customer. And it needs to be seamless and all kind of singing the same tune. So whether that's your marketing and what you're talking about, whether that's your day-to-day, let's say in-store, on app, or, emails, whatever, any contact point whatsoever, or the delivery when it arrives, the unboxing experience, all of that matters, including exceptional customer service. However you're manning that support, it's all of it. That's brilliant customer experience, end-to-end journey, and that's, yeah, I think that'll be inscribed on my tombstone.
Really, it's the same as what I wanted to say. It is a misunderstanding because CX is a horizontal function, really. It just touches different parts of the business. And people who are great at leading CX are, and I've heard this a few times, not the ones with the highest empathy. What? It's the ones that are the ultimate influencers, dot connectors, translators of data, relationship builders. You don't ever really deliver it yourself unless you do own that customer support function, which, for example, I did at Tails.com, right, as a part of the customer experience bit. And it's such an interesting role, and it's such an interesting function. It's about how you can help people make sense and align. So, that's what it actually is, and that's how it should function. And whatever the role name that you put on, every business should have that. Otherwise, you do really very quickly start sort of working in silos.
Yeah.
So I fully, Marie, that's the, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you sort of bring me nicely to the other part of that, is understanding that it is a really commercial lever for the business. Spotting things early, making sure you're making the right investment, you're meeting that need, spotting the thing that's changed, testing before launching a new feature, and actually in my more recent roles in more traditional financial services, cost saving, improving parts of the journey to avoid, frankly, huge fines from the regulator. So still ROI on CX.
Definitely.
And you mentioned cost, and I think on the other side of that is the thinking that customer support, customer operations teams are just a cost center. That blows my mind, because, and it is such a prevalent belief. It's like, oh, when you think about saving costs, of course, you're going to go to how to improve your margin and your suppliers, and your operational costs, all of that stuff. But you're also going to go, it's like, how can we cut costs in customer support? And if you do it right, by making your process more effective, your people upskilled, by introducing AI where it fits, and I'm never going to recommend AI virtual agents for new companies, because it's just a recipe for disaster. But it's finding what problems you want to solve in those. What those teams are is a massive representation of your brand, is people who speak to your customers all the time, who can really contribute when developing new product features, customer journey improvements and things like that, and who are, if you look at data right, and if you create connections, who are actually generating extra revenue by helping you retain customers, potentially upselling, cross-selling, new services. There's a massive opportunity here. But again, you have to look at it from that commercial perspective of like, how can you leverage these teams and really appreciate them, appreciate the people, and how much revenue they can bring in. When we did testing at Tales.com, they brought in the first year just $1 million extra quid just for doing a little bit of upselling in the team. And, you know, depending on your revenue, and I think you can really scale it. And we've proven that you can really scale that. So don't ever look at it as a cost center. Yes, it costs like everything else, but it's a massive opportunity and a growth lever rather than just the cost. Like everything in CX is, but I think we have a really sort of bad association with contact centers. And actually, they're pools of opportunity if you just know how to use it.
Definitely. And I think people worry about hiring people in that they think would be almost like sales contact center, but sometimes it's about delivering great service. And if you deliver great service, it can upsell on certain things. Like we've just brought in for one of our companies a retention lead, and all of a sudden they've plugged loads more heads into that team because they're like, oh my God, they're making so much money. Our customers love it, and they're really easy to hire people into. We thought it'd be a lot more complex, and it's generated X amount of revenue. And you go, it is, if you set it up correctly with the right people, the right metric, the right insight, it's going to deliver good things for your customers and the business, right?
Yeah, and how many people are actually, as a customer, if you reach out to someone, you actually get to speak to a person these days. And instantly it's like, oh, this is much better. There's an article, I don't remember where it was, maybe Guardian, I don't remember, but it just said how much worse the service actually has gotten in the UK over the last years, which you'd think it would be different because of
service, I think.
Yeah, it's really declined.
Yeah.
So why we're investing more into tools and everything is because you're losing that human element of it, right? I'm not saying just keep humans, don't ever make anything effective. That's really not what I'm saying. I'm quite a commercial person, but keep those human touch where it really matters. And give autonomy to your teams to actually be customer led. Give them guidelines, give them, principles that they work, sort of boundaries that they work within, but let them do the right thing for the customer. That actually applies to anyone working in the business. In CRM, you should be able to create copy that is more customer led and things like that. It doesn't just apply to customer support teams, but really use the people who really, most people want to help others, right? So it's the same in business. Like give them the opportunity, use the people to your advantage, rather than sort of going like what I think you mentioned that before, Carrie, magpie to a new shiny object, which is the new tool, whatever it is, AI or not.
There's a million soapboxes we could get on in this, because my other frustration with it is when people go, CX is just marketing, or like CMO, there's no CMO roles now. They're changing to chief customer officer roles. And I think CMO and chief customer officer roles are fairly different.
Oh, yeah, yes, they are. I think it's reinventing the wheel all the times, right? A little bit. It's just like thinking, and I'm not really obsessed with the names of the roles. I think the fundamentally is like, do you have the bones? Like, is someone, either people and functions in your business that can connect the dots and things that are happening to your customer and put in the full picture and be like, these are our issues. This is where the friction lies. That's what we need to fix. This is what it's going to save us or generate more revenue. Like someone needs to tell the story and influence the direction. What that person is called, sometimes that's not necessarily the main thing, I guess.
Absolutely. And to go to some of the comments here, we have one here that just said, yep, true. Care about complaining because I care enough that a company would fix it. Because I think, again, people think complaints, they're just moaners. But I think actually they're valuable business insight, right? In terms of if you've got a load of complaints about the same thing, be unique. This one is a longer question from Pete. It's got in terms of 2 bits and pieces here. So the invite made the point about UX being key to challenger businesses. One thing that keeps coming up is that customers aren't loyal, as was said earlier. CX and UX experts clearly bring a lot to the table. However, as mentioned just now, many businesses struggle with the point they're bringing in a director of customer insight and driving good UX. They hear about and believe in the idea until it comes to creating the position and team with the budget. How can we help some of these organizations recognize the criticality of such roles?
I think this is broadening the point that we touched on earlier around it's it's often a function that businesses see as, you know, a big expense or a nice to have. And actually why fractional can really help is to come in and prove the worth in a really critical project, and that can pave the way. And we mentioned before, you know, helping you hire the right people who might be less expensive, therefore day to day, and so requires less budget and selling. So it's helping the business go on that journey and seeing either the cost saving or the acceleration in growth with a certain group, that a few key insights or improvements to that broader CX function can bring. So I think the fractional piece or coming in to help with a crucial project can help open up the business's eyes to just how valuable roles at all different levels can be, and it doesn't have to be big.
No, it's timing. Timing's everything that we notice with hiring people at the right level, because it's the same as people like you, Orinta, as well, in terms of the customer support piece and operationalizing the CX. I have known people who hire that in before they've started getting customers. They've got a concept and they build great processes. They've got, when a customer gets in touch, amazing. However, they've not got any customers yet, or not enough customers yet. So
start simple. You don't need, and you may just want to hire someone who just speaks to your customers. And actually, as founders, you should speak to customers yourselves in the first day, you know, in the beginning, because you want to hear it so directly. That actually brings to one of my last points, looking at the time, but positioning your customer experience and your service is important in the beginning. We've sort of gone full loop now, right? Because depending what industry you're in and what you're selling, you don't need necessarily to have the most amazing game-changing service that you can never have. If you're selling something like, I don't know, boilers or whatever, you need to have solid support because you need the trust. Why I chose boilers. Spirit.
The most boring thing I could think of.
No, but it's it's critical, especially if you've got a young family.
Yeah, my friends just have
really
to have one.
Important.
That's true.
That's 2 weeks without a boiler, to be fair. So my friend has just been really thinking about it.
But it's like, if you mentioned children, let's just say you are, and I do know of a business who is to do with childcare, right? And they've early on outsourced their service to a far away country. There's nothing wrong with that in general, in the right company, in the right circumstances. But if you trusting someone, your child, to someone to take care of, and you want to speak to them, you want them to at least be in the UK. That is such a massive mistake. And as a parent, I would never trust them because they just didn't really understand what the service means in this. Or money, you know, where you worked in banks as well. It's like such an emotive subject. You want someone to have really strong service.
If you've been victim of a scam, you need very fast service, and you need to be able to have a conversation where you can both understand each other really, really clearly. Health as well. There are some genres that are so much more time and you know, level of understanding critical.
So boilers might not have been the right, you know, heating and all that stuff. But if it's something like you've got something late, but it's, I don't know, it's a tool that you bought, whatever, everyone wants to get great service, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker for you. But if you're dealing with fraud, if you're dealing with, you know, health, all those things that we just talked about, your service is so much more important than you may think initially. So I think it's about deciding what it will mean to you as a business, and if it's actually part of your proposition anyway. And then sort of, you know, starting with that as your North Star. But really, you can start by just having an email and just replying to customers and calling them back. It doesn't have to be complicated. I'm all for simplifying things depending on the stage that you're in as a business.
And to be honest, I think your point worked really nicely with the boilers. It was more of a one-off purchase, right? It's the same sometimes with a car, like when people were thinking about secondhand cars. It's not like a food or any subscription business where you're in regular contact or your customers are regularly buying from you. It's something that maybe you want to make memorable in a good way for hopefully the 10 to 15 years by the time you need your next boiler.
But you know, on the positioning things, AO.com, do you know how many, like, they just have non-stop good reviews? And the founder, I don't remember the name now, but they position themselves. There's no complicated frameworks. It's like their sort of mantra is make decisions that would make your mom proud and treat everyone like you treat your nan. That is it. I mean, isn't that wonderful? Because that just tells you, like, be kind, be sort of, be customer led, but in that really simple human way. And that's how they still ground their decisions in. And they were in one of the showcases for a book by John Sills about human experience. I'd recommend that if anyone wants to read that. But yes, just, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Oh, that's a nice closer from you, actually, in terms of the AO. Have you got any closing statements, Marie? Or any?
No, I will just return to my earlier offer of, if anyone wants to rack my brains, come and find me under Marie Lewis Insight on LinkedIn. I am more than happy just to have a coffee or a chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same here.
And I will say anything on fractional support and things that it's always been super duper helpful in terms of padding out your more full-time roles and stuff as well when you have managers within the business. It's why I have always hired from management to C-suite, because actually businesses come to us going, hey, we need a VP. And you very quickly realize, you need a manager, really. And you would have cost yourself an absolute fortune. So thank you so much for tuning in or listening to us after, or downloading with AI a transcript of this conversation. It tends to be quite popular now. But thank you so much, Marie and Orinta, for your time, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much, then. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks. Hey, there.